By the way, you'll recall on our very first ever episode of CBS Mornings Plus, we told you about the potential legalization of gambling on presidential elections, something at the time I called maybe the dumbest thing a democracy has ever done to itself. People motivated by payouts instead of politics and policy. Well, that betting on the election, it happened, it was legalized, and guess what? Our guest at the time said that election betting might actually be useful and possibly a stronger measure of public opinion than polling. And he may have been right about that. Traditional polling averages leading up to the election showed a statistical tie, of course, between Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. A toss-up, as all the pundits said at the time. And the betting markets were way more decisive, putting Donald Trump's odds of winning at 60%. What that means now is that thousands of people who gambled cold hard cash on the outcome are now waiting on hundreds of millions of dollars in cold hard cash as payouts because they were right. Good for them. May they have a Merry Christmas. May they get the big ham. Go somewhere warm for the winter. But allow me to be quaint for a moment, because just because betting markets seem to get it right doesn't mean they're good. I still think public opinion should reflect independent public judgment, not public relations, not political consulting, not any of the zillion other distortions we currently allow, and not gambling. But I think, Adriana, we've got someone who's going to tell me I'm wrong.
We absolutely do, Tony. Please welcome back John Aristotle Phillips, the CEO of PredictIt, one of the platforms where people placed bets on the election. And you were on our show when we launched talking about how this is an effective, efficient market to predict the actual winner. And we were stunned. And yet here we sit.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for coming back for your victory lap. But please explain to us, why do you say that historically gambling is a predictor of elections?
Well, markets are a predictor of elections, and these gambling sites are set up as stock markets where you can buy and sell the future and future predictions as to what's going to happen. It's not just politics, it's all kinds of things. It can be awards, it can be scientific discoveries. Markets are very efficient at assimilating lots of pieces of information, millions and sometimes billions of pieces of information, into distilling that into prices, which is the same as odds.
But the most important information in an election is how people are going to vote, and polling tries to measure that. So why do you say that polling isn't as strong as a market? And then again, markets aren't perfect, because you guys were way off on the population, on the popular vote for Trump, and I think in the 2022 elections, the markets didn't predict it as well.
So polling does something different than markets and gambling sites. Polling asks people why they feel the way they do and what are they going to do. Who do you support? If the election were held tomorrow, for whom would you vote? That's a very important monitor, but that's different from saying, what do you think is going to happen? A betting market, or markets in general, say, what do you think is going to happen rather than what you want to have happen. So these markets traditionally, and when a market says something is only 30% likely to happen, that means 30% of the time that thing is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that these markets are pretty good at assimilating information. And polling takes a while. It takes a couple of days, sometimes as long as almost a week, to distill that information. These betting markets react instantly to volatile events.
But, John, I don't want to turn into E.B. White here. I'm not going to compose an essay on democracy, but I do think there's a certain hush within the voting booth. It's the voter, it's the ballot. They're making a decision, what reflects their political heart. Now it's that plus, do they have a wager on it? Doesn't that distort things?
It actually, there's no evidence that it does. And what we talked about the last time we were on is this a threat to democracy? Democracy is alive and kicking. It functioned well on Election Day. And it's a messy business, and it's going to function well into the future. We've been working on this for thousands of years, and again, it's individual opinions about what is going to happen is different from forecasting what actually is going to happen.
Speaking of messiness, insider trading is outlawed, but you could have insider trading in a political gambling market. If I were a senator and I knew what was going to happen, or I knew that somebody was likely not going to get confirmed, I could bet on that. What kind of regulations do you have to prevent that?
So actually, that is prohibited by law. So staff and members of Congress are prohibited from betting on markets where they have inside information. Those laws have been on the books for a while. It's not just having to do with gambling. It has to do with just profiting in the stock market if you know that something's going to happen because you have non-public information. So these laws exist to police that. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of these bets that are placed on these elections are small bets. And on PredictIt, which has been around, which is a site we run, which has been around for 10 years, we celebrated our 10th anniversary in October.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. On PredictIt, there's an $850 position limit. So you might be able to cash in and you make a little bit of money, but people are not losing their homes and they're not making millions and millions of dollars on PredictIt.
But on Kalshi, you can go. I think the cap is a $100 million bet. That's a big deal. You're cool with that too?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe there should be a limit on these. We run our site with a limit. There are arguments for not having limits on this. Mainly, if you want to hedge an investment, if a company wants to hedge against an increase in fuel costs, for instance, for airlines, those mechanisms exist currently. But hedging for political risk is another important consideration. So people who invest in green energy stocks or other types of pharmaceutical stocks, they might want to hedge for the outcome of an election.
All right.
John Aristotle, Phillips of PredictIt, thank you very much for being a good sport and also very stylish. This is what I'm going to wear to your birthday.
Oh,
though.
great.
This is my off-air look.
I can't wait,
Stylish
Tony.
man.
That's a compliment.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.